the unluckiest ship in the galaxy. The Zorp wasn't just unlucky, it was cosmically, historically, statistically, offensively unlucky. Its hull was a patchwork of mismatched plating, each piece a testament to a near-miss with a rogue asteroid, a pirate laser blast, or, in one memorable instance, a space whale suffering indigestion. Captain Lila, perched on a wobbly stool in the cockpit, stared out at the inky black sprinkled with diamond dust. She chewed on the end of a synth protein bar, the artificial berry flavor doing little to lift her spirits. Another standard cargo run, hauling nutrient paste from Kepler 186f to a research station orbiting Epsilon Eridani. Thrilling. Lila sighed. She hadn't signed up for a life of galactic trucking. She'd dreamed of charting new nebulae, discovering lost civilizations, maybe even wrestling a space kraken or two. Instead, she was stuck with the Zorp, a ship that seemed actively determined to sabotage any attempt at excitement. The Zorp chose that moment to prove her point. A klaxon blared, a discordant shriek that rattled Lila's teeth. Lights flickered, plunging the cockpit into momentary darkness. Fizz! Lila yelled, her voice barely audible over the alarm. A frantic voice crackled over the comms. Captain! We've got a tertiary conduit failure in the starboard nacelle power distribution grid. Also, the gravity compensator in Cargo Bay 3 seems to be co-inverting. I think? Lila massaged her temples. Inverting gravity? How is that even possible, Fizz? Well, Fizz's voice was a strained squeak. It involves a complex interaction between the quantum entanglement of the antimatter containment field and... Look, it's bad, Captain. Very bad. Lila switched off the comms and muttered, just another Tuesday. She yanked the emergency override lever, shutting down non-essential systems. The klaxon died with a strangled gasp. The lights flickered back on, revealing the Zorp's interior in all its duct-taped glory. The Zorp's cockpit was a study in organized chaos. Wires snaked across the console like metallic vines. A half-eaten sandwich sat precariously on the navigation panel. A faded poster of a nebula, the Veil Nebula, a place Lila had always wanted to visit, was peeling off the wall. It mocked her with its vibrant colors and promise of adventure. The ship lurched violently. Lila grabbed the controls, wrestling the Zorp back into a semblance of stability. Grunt, she yelled into the comms. Report! A gruff voice, thick with disapproval, responded. I'm in Cargo Bay 3, Captain. And I'm about to be walking on the ceiling if this infernal gravity thing doesn't get fixed. Fizz is working on it. Just try not to fall on any of the nutrient paste containers. Nutrient paste is the least of my worries. I've got crates of bioluminescent fungi floating around like angry jellyfish. Lila sighed again. This was the Zorp in its natural habitat, malfunctioning, chaotic, and thoroughly infuriating. She glanced at the navigation screen. Still weeks away from Epsilon Eridani. Weeks of potential crises, each more bizarre than the last. She tried to focus on the positive. At least they weren't being attacked by space pirates. Yet. A few minutes later, Fizz's voice, slightly less panicked, came over the comms. Captain! I've rerouted power from the dorsal sensor array to the gravity compensator. It should hold, for a while. Good work, Fizz. What about the conduit failure? I've bypassed the damaged section with some repurposed toaster coils and a generous application of polysealant. It's not pretty, but it'll get us there. Lila couldn't help but smile. Fizz Sparkplug was a miracle worker. A perpetually anxious, easily flustered miracle worker, but a miracle worker nonetheless. Without him, the Zorp would have been space dust years ago. Thanks, Fizz. You're a lifesaver. Just doing my job, Captain, Fizz replied, though Lila could hear the relief in his voice. Lila turned her attention back to the star field. The Zorp, still shuddering slightly, continued its slow, ungainly journey. She knew, deep down, that this wasn't the life she wanted. Hauling cargo on a broken-down ship wasn't the adventure she'd dreamed of. But what choice did she have? She was a captain without a command, a pilot without a purpose, stuck with the unluckiest ship in the galaxy and a crew of lovable misfits. Grunt's voice boomed over the comms again. "Captain! One of the fungi just stung me. I think I'm hallucinating." Lila closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "Just another Tuesday," she repeated, this time with a touch of resignation. She opened her eyes, determined to focus on the task at hand. Get the nutrient paste to Epsilon Eridani. Keep the Zorp from falling apart. And try, just try, to find some way to make this miserable existence a little less miserable. Suddenly, a piercing shriek echoed through the ship, even louder and more jarring than the previous alarm. This one was different, though. It had a distinctly alien quality. Lila's eyes widened. She checked the sensor readings. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Fizz. What was that? She demanded. Fizz's voice was a high-pitched squeal. I don't know, Captain. The sensors aren't picking up anything. Grunt. Did you hear that? Hear it? I'm pretty sure it just rearranged my internal organs. What in the blazes was that? Lila stared at the star field, her heart pounding in her chest. Something was out there. Something the Zorp's ancient, unreliable sensors couldn't detect. Something dangerous. A flicker of something caught her eye. A distortion in the blackness, a subtle ripple in the fabric of space. It was gone in an instant, but Lila had seen it. She gripped the controls, her knuckles white. The Zorp, oblivious to the impending danger, continued its lumbering trajectory. Lila felt a surge of adrenaline, a jolt of something she hadn't felt in a long time, fear. And something else, something that surprised even her, excitement. Maybe, just maybe, this cargo run wouldn't be so boring after all. The Zorp wasn't just unlucky. It was a magnet for trouble. And trouble, Lila realized, might be exactly what she needed. She activated the long-range scanners, ignoring Fizz's frantic protests about power consumption. She had a feeling that whatever was out there was about to change their lives forever. And for the first time in a long time, Lila felt a glimmer of hope. The kind of hope that only comes when you're staring into the face of the unknown, with nothing but a broken-down ship and a crew of misfits at your side. "All right, you miserable bucket of bolts," she muttered to the Zorp. "Let's see what kind of trouble we can find." A signal in the dark. The alien shriek dissolved into a ringing void, punctuated only by the wheezing sighs of the Zorp's weary life support. Lila's gaze locked onto the navigation console where the spatial distortion swam, a queer, iridescent ripple on the screen. Before understanding could coalesce, a klaxon strident cry tore through the bridge. "What fresh hell is that racket?" Grunt Grumblestone roared, his bulk filling the doorway, a wrench clutched in his hand, grime etching lines across his brow. Behind him, Fizz Sparkplug, goggles askew, darted in, frantically manipulating a handheld scanner. "Distress beacon, Captain." Weak signal, severely corrupted, but undeniably a cry for help. His fingers danced across the device, his expression pinched with worry. Originating near the Klargan Nebula. Grunt ejected a dark gob onto the deck. "The Klargan Nebula? You gotta be kidding me. That's a death wish." Lila, unfazed, tracked the coordinates Fizz had managed to pull. A distress call in that region. This could be it, guys. The adventure we've been chasing. Fizz visibly gulped. "Adventure, Captain? That nebula's a ship graveyard. Spatial warps, rogue planetoids, not to mention the whispered legends." "Legends are just fear-mongering," Lila declared, dismissing his apprehension with a flick of her wrist. "Besides, someone needs assistance." A grin bloomed on her face, her eyes alight with anticipation. "Plot a course, Fizz. We're diving in." Grunt's wrench clattered to the floor. "You're stark raving mad, Lila. We haul freight, we don't run rescue missions. This bucket's barely space-worthy as is. The nebula'll grind us to dust before we get close." "We'll tread carefully, Grunt," Lila soothed, her tone resolute but gentle. "We'll hug the periphery, keep the shields at max, and trust Fizz to nurse this old girl along." "And," she added, a mischievous spark igniting her gaze, "what's existence without a little gamble?" Grunt rumbled under his breath, already defeated. He always squawked, but he invariably delivered. "Gambling's what's gonna give me an early grave," he muttered, retrieving his wrench with a weary sigh. "Don't come crying to me when we're atomized." Fizz, meanwhile, punched the coordinates into the navigation system, his digits a blur across the keys. "Course locked, Captain." "But I echo Grunt's sentiment. The Klargan Nebula is volatile. We'll need to shunt power to the shields and nav sensors. That'll steal juice from life support, so things might get a tad stuffy." "Stuffy beat space stew," Grunt growled. "We'll cope," Lila affirmed, her voice ringing with resolve. Fizz, ETA to the signal source. "At our current velocity, roughly 12 hours, Captain. Provided we don't encounter any snags." He darted a nervous glance at the sensor panel, which flickered with growing instability. "Snags are our forte," Lila quipped with a wry grin. "All right, let's prep this hulk for action. Grunt, verify hull integrity. Seal every seam. Fizz, prioritize rerouting power and calibrating sensors. And both of you," she added, her voice tightening, less belly-aching. "This is happening." The ensuing hours became a whirlwind of activity. Grunt, despite his protests, obsessively examined every inch of the Zorp's aging skin, plugging breaches with whatever came to hand, sealant paste, heavy-duty tape, even a plug of chewing gum in one particularly egregious spot. The airlock mechanisms received special consideration, their aging gears grinding in protest. Fizz, in the meantime, wrestled with the Zorp's prehistoric power grid, diverting energy with a mix of expertise and dumb luck. Sparks cascaded, wires snapped and hissed, and the ship shuddered under the strain, but slowly, painstakingly, he coaxed enough power to the shields and navigation suites. The temperature on the bridge began to creep upwards, and the air, recycled and stale, carried a faint metallic twang. As they neared the edge of the Klargan Nebula, the view screen erupted in a riot of visual noise. The star field ahead had dissolved into a churning kaleidoscope of amethyst, emerald, and tangerine, all blended in a chaotic, dreamlike swirl. Spatial distortion swam in the distance, twisting light into grotesque caricatures. "Sensors going crazy, Captain!" Fizz yelled over the whine of overworked engines. "I'm picking up everything, gravitational waves, energy spikes, unidentified masses, it's pure pandemonium." "Just hold our course, Fizz," Lila commanded, her eyes riveted to the view screen. "And keep those shields humming." A knot of tension tightened in her gut, a cocktail of thrill and trepidation. The Klargan Nebula lived up to its terrifying billing. Deeper within the nebula's embrace, the distress signal intensified, yet it also turned erratic, pulsating with a strange, rhythmic cadence that mirrored a heart struggling to beat. Lila felt a growing premonition. Something felt off. Suddenly, the ship bucked violently, catapulting the crew from their stations. Alarms shrieked, red lights strobe, and the Zorp shuddered like a wounded beast. What in blazes was that? Lila roared, struggling to regain her footing. "Spatial warp!" Fizz yelled back, wrestling with the helm. "We slammed into some kind of tear in space. Shields are up, but we've lost navigation." The view screen flickered, then died, replaced by a static-filled abyss. The Zorp was adrift, blind, and alone in the black heart of the Klargan Nebula. Grunt, who had collided with a wall, groaned and pushed himself upright. "Well, ain't this just peachy," he drawled, dripping with sarcasm. "Just criffing delightful. Hope you're happy now, Lila. Your adventure just marooned us in the most cursed corner of the galaxy." Lila ignored his harangue, her mind already racing. They were mired in deep trouble, yet surrender was not an option. Not now. Not when they were this close. "Fizz, can you reboot the navigation?" she asked, her voice a beacon of calm amid the chaos. "Trying, Captain," Fizz replied, his fingers flying across the controls. "But the system's fried." This will take time. Time is a luxury we can't afford, Lila said grimly. We're sitting ducks out here. Her gaze locked onto Grunt, her eyes narrowing. Grunt, get to the auxiliary power core. We need to feed power to the backup navigation. Grunt hesitated, then sighed. Fine, he grumbled. But if I end up as cosmic confetti, I'm haunting you for eternity. He lumbered out of the bridge, leaving Lila alone with Fizz, the blinking lights, and the oppressive silence of the Klargan Nebula. The distress signal pulsed on, a faint whisper of hope in the encroaching darkness. Lila knew that whatever awaited them, it would be fraught with peril. Yet, retreat was impossible. Not now. Not ever. They had a call to answer. The Krill trap. The Zorp listed awkwardly toward the space station, its emergency flashes painting a frantic staccato against the iridescent nebula. What appeared as a sanctuary on their compromised comms now dominated their view, an ungainly, asymmetrical jumble of bolted metal and winking hazard beacons, like a long-forgotten monument choked by cosmic detritus. Still think we should have aborted? Grunt grumbled, his voice amplified in the confined cockpit. This stinks of a cosmic snare. Distress beacon, my eye, more likely space scum looking for easy pickings. Fizz, face illuminated by the erratic glow of his console, fiddled with his goggles. Energy signatures are unstable, to say the least. But there's power, Captain. Enough to broadcast that signal, definitely. Lila, her gaze unwavering from the station, dismissed Grunt's apprehension. Prepare to dock. Fizz, try patching into their network. Perhaps we can discern what befell this place. The Zorp groaned as magnetic clamps secured them to the derelict station. The airlock wheezed open, revealing a dimly illuminated corridor, filmed with a layer of greasy grime. Blaster raised, Lila stepped forward, followed by Grunt, clutching his ever-present wrench, and Fizz, whose scanner pulsed with data. Creepy, Fizz breathed, his voice barely audible. Like a ghost ship, but static. Stay sharp, Lila commanded, her tone firm. Grunt, advance. I want you to scout for any signs of life, or anything else. Grunt trudged ahead, his boots crunching over scattered debris. Silence permeated the station, broken only by the hum of the Zorp's life support and the occasional drip of condensation. They navigated past vacant crew quarters, an abandoned mess hall strewn with overturned tables, and a control room littered with shattered displays and frayed wiring. This place is a disaster, Grunt observed. Whatever went down here, it wasn't pretty. Fizz halted before a sealed door, his scanner emitting a rapid series of beeps. Main power nexus. The readings are going wild. This is ground zero for that signal, I bet. Lila nodded. Override the lock, if you can. Fizz manipulated his scanner, his brow furrowed in concentration. Almost. There. With a sharp click, the door retracted, unveiling a vast, cylindrical chamber filled with thrumming generators and arcing cables. At its center, a solitary terminal cast an eerie viridescent glow. Jackpot, Lila said, entering the room. That must be the transmission array. As she approached the console, a low, bestial growl reverberated through the chamber. Lila stiffened, her grip tightening on her blaster. Did you catch that? She whispered. Abruptly, the light stuttered and died, plunging the chamber into inky darkness. Crimson emergency strobes sputtered to life, casting elongated, grotesque shadows. The growling intensified, punctuated by a series of metallic clicks that sent chills down their spines. Ambush! Lila shouted, firing blindly into the gloom. Energy bolts lanced from the shadows, narrowly missing her. Grunt bellowed and swung his wrench, impacting something with a sickening crunch. Fizz shrieked, diving behind a generator for cover. Figures materialized from the darkness, outlined by the flickering red lights. Tall and gaunt, with chitinous carapaces and malevolent crimson eyes. Krill warriors. Krill! Grunt roared, dodging another pulse of plasma. I knew it. We played right into their hands. Lila returned fire, felling one of the krill with a precise shot. But more surged forward, their numbers seemingly inexhaustible. They moved with unsettling speed and grace, their claws honed to razor sharpness. "Fizz, reach the Zorp!" Lila yelled. "Get us clear!" Fizz, his face ashen, scrambled from the power conduit and dashed back toward the airlock. Lila and Grunt fought shoulder to shoulder, desperately repelling the krill assault. As Fizz reached the airlock, the entire station convulsed violently. The lights flickered erratically, and a deafening roar echoed through the corridors. Fizz looked up in abject terror as the docking clamps detached, and the Zorp began to drift away. "Captain! Grunt!" "The ship," he cried, pounding on the sealed portal. Lila glanced toward the airlock, her spirits plummeting. They were stranded. Instantly, a brilliant beam of pure energy engulfed the Zorp, wrenching it from the station with impossible velocity. The ship shuddered and groaned under the immense force. "What in blazes is happening?" Grunt yelled, as he neutralized another krill. Lila peered out of the power conduit's viewport. Through the swirling nebula, she could make out a colossal warship emerging from behind the station. Its hull was obsidian and ominous, bristling with weaponry and radiating dark energy. "The Devourer," Lila whispered, her voice laced with horror. "It's a krill dreadnought. We're caught in a tractor beam." The Zorp was dragged inexorably toward the Devourer, its fragile hull protesting under the strain. Moments later, it was secured within the warship's docking bay, a helpless beetle ensnared in a web. Sensing their triumph, the krill warriors ceased their attack and melted back into the shadows. Lila and Grunt stood back to back, bruised and breathless, their weapons hanging limply at their sides. "Well," Grunt said, his tone bleak. "Guess we're guests of honor now." Lila stared at the Devourer, her mind churning. They were outmatched, outwitted, and cornered. But even in the face of certain doom, a spark of defiance ignited in her gaze. "Not for long," she muttered. "Not for long." Inside the Zorp, Fizz watched powerlessly as the warship's clamps sealed around his vessel. The airlock door hissed open, and a squad of heavily armored krill warriors swarmed inside, their weapons leveled at him. He raised his hands, surrendering to the inevitable, his mind filled with dread. This was it. The end of the line for the Zorp and its crew. Inside the Devourer, the airlock wheezed open, expelling Lila and Grunt onto a frigid, steel deck. A cloying stench, reeking of krill biology and decay, filled Lila's senses. Flanked by two krill warriors, their carapaces shimmering under crimson illumination, they were forced onward. Grunt stumbled, a stream of muttered invective escaping his lips. "Save it, Stonehead," Lila hissed, despite the tremor of fear that ran through her. This passageway was utterly alien, a snarl of conduits, cables, and ominous machinery, thrumming with strange power. They were herded through the Devourer's innards, past lines of krill drones attending to pulsating consoles and droning generators. The sheer magnitude of the vessel was daunting. Lila glimpsed cavernous bays choked with insectoid fighters, and weapon platforms that made her own ship's armaments look like toys. This was more than a warship, it was a mechanized world. Finally, they were shoved into a claustrophobic cell. The door slammed shut, the reverberation echoing like a death knell. Inside, Fizz was curled up, his goggles askew, his slight frame trembling. "Fizz!" Lila cried, rushing to envelop him in a hug. "Are you all right?" I witnessed things," Fizz whispered, his voice a mere breath. They were dissecting something. I don't know what, but it was alive." Grunt scoffed. "Probably just some space slug they dredged up." "Stiffen your spine, Fizz. We're deep enough as it is." He commenced pacing, his heavy boots ringing against the metal floor. "All thanks to you, Lila, and your grand idea to answer a phantom distress call. Knew it had to be a setup." "Spare me, Grunt," Lila snapped, her patience fraying. "We're still drawing breath, aren't we? We'll find a way out." Her gaze swept the cell, searching for a weakness, a sliver of opportunity. The walls were blank and featureless, save for a small, grilled aperture offering a view of a breathtaking, star-strewn void. "Find what?" Grunt grumbled. "We're inmates on a Krill flagship. We're cosmic garbage." "Not until they jettison us," Lila retorted, her voice steely. "Fizz, recount what you saw during your abduction." Fizz inhaled deeply, struggling to regain control. They hauled me to the bridge. I spotted the Zorp docked in one of their hangars." Lila's eyes narrowed, a predatory gleam within them. "Undamaged?" "Yes, but they were tampering with it. Affixing something to the hull." A chill snaked down Lila's spine. "Elaborate." "I couldn't discern the specifics," Fizz responded, "but it seemed like a transmitter of sorts. A massive one." Abruptly, a voice crackled from a wall-mounted speaker. It was guttural and alien, yet a translator rendered it into clumsy galactic standard. "Greetings, captives. Bear witness to the Krill ascendancy in all its glory. Behold the twilight of the Galactic Federation." Lila exchanged a look of dread with Grunt and Fizz. This was far beyond just capturing a transport. The speaker buzzed once more. "Your vessel, the Zorp, will serve a pivotal purpose. It will draw the Federation canines into our waiting jaws." "Jaws?" Grunt questioned, his voice laced with worry. "What sort of trap?" The voice emitted a dry, grating chuckle. "Patience, insignificant rock dweller. All will be unveiled in due time." Then silence. A knot of apprehension clenched in Lila's stomach. The Zorp was the law. But what prize did the Krill seek to ensnare? What could they possibly hope to achieve by provoking the Federation? Unless they intend to use the Zorp to bait them into the nebula, Lila murmured, her voice hushed with realization. "The one we were avoiding. They must possess knowledge of it." Fizz gasped, fear coloring his face. "But the nebula is lethal. Teeming with temporal anomalies and lethal energy fields." "Precisely," Lila said, her tone grim. "The Krill aren't just planning a skirmish, they're orchestrating a massacre. They aim to weaponize the nebula's perils." Grunt rubbed his bare scalp, his brow furrowed with concern. "So, they leverage our ship to drag the feds into a charnel house. Swell. Just swell." "We must thwart them," Lila stated, her gaze hardening. "We need to issue a warning to the Federation, somehow." "And how do you propose we accomplish that?" Grunt rejoined, gesturing at their prison. "We're more locked down than a void whale's digestive tract." Lila approached the barred opening, gazing out at the swirling panorama of stars. The nebula was a faint, iridescent shimmer in the distance. It was a long shot, but she had to try. "Fizz," she said, turning to face the young technician. "You mentioned being on the bridge. Did you observe any access points? Any means of tapping into their communications network?" Fizz's eyes widened with a spark of possibility. Perhaps there was a junction panel situated near the navigation station. But it was heavily guarded. "We don't require mastery of the entire network," Lila explained. "Just enough to transmit a distress call. A brief, encrypted burst. Something that will alert the Federation before it's too late." Fizz hesitated, doubt clouding his features. "I don't know, Lila. The Krill possess sophisticated countermeasures. They'll detect us for sure." "We lack alternatives, Fizz," Lila insisted, her voice unwavering. "The Federation's survival might hinge on it." Grunt sighed, his shoulders sagging. Fine. I'm on board. But should we get caught, I'm laying the blame squarely at your feet." Lila disregarded Grunt's grumbling. She fixed her gaze on Fizz, determination burning in her eyes. "Can you manage it, Fizz? Can you circumvent their security and broadcast a message?" Fizz swallowed hard, his gaze darting between Lila and the distant nebula. He understood the immeasurable risks, yet he also knew that inaction was not an option. "I'll endeavor," he said, a newfound strength infusing his voice. "I'll give it my all." Lila nodded, a flicker of hope kindling within her. They were prisoners, marooned on a Krill warship, but they were not broken. Not yet. They possessed a plan, a fragile chance, and the unwavering belief that even the most insignificant spark could ignite a rebellion. Then let's commence, Lila declared, her voice resonating with renewed resolve. We have a galaxy to salvage. A spark of hope. The astringent scent of dried krill ichor, thankfully, was the only tangible reminder of their captivity. Fizz, lost in his frenetic tinkering, didn't seem to register it. Goggles askew on his forehead, he poured through a heap of cast-off krill technology. Broken circuit boards, monitors displaying gibberish, and severed power cables formed a chaotic landscape around him. Fizz, you sure about this? Grunt rumbled, his bulk shifting on the unforgiving floor. Shouldn't we be plotting our breakout, not constructing, whatever that contraption is? Without looking up, Fizz replied, trust me, Grunt. It's potentially our golden ticket out. Or, at the very least, to getting that warning transmitted. Lila observed him, her optimism hanging by a thread. What have you discovered? The krill, Fizz announced, a rare thrill coloring his voice, they're less monolithic than they appear. Their hardware's consistent, granted, but their control architecture surprisingly porous. He brandished a palm-sized gizmo, marred with scratches and dents. A remote module for one of their diminutive drones. Worthless on its own, but he tapped it with a small wrench. It sparked an idea. An idea pertaining to what, precisely? Grunt pressed, his ingrained skepticism vying with a spark of interest. Recall your observation about their vessels being interconnected, all puppet by that core devourer system. Fizz queried, finally locking eyes with Grunt. A slow nod. This module utilizes a very specific frequency to interface with the primary network. Encrypted, yes, but the coding lacks. Negligent. Lila's brow furrowed. Lacks encryption? From the krill. Precisely. Fizz crowed, a wild grin illuminating his features. They've been so assured of their system's inviolability, they neglected fundamental security measures. I believe I can hitch a ride on that frequency. I think I can beam a signal straight to the devourer. Grunt's eyes widened. You intend to infiltrate their central command? Hardly infiltrate, Fizz countered, waving his wrench dismissively. More like dispatching a strongly worded communique through their established channels. I simply need to amplify the signal. He gestured towards a web of wires he was meticulously splicing. And that's where the true amusement begins. The subsequent hours dissolved into a frenzy of activity. Fizz, jolted by caffeine poached from a discarded krill nutrient pack, labored with supernova intensity. Sparks snapped as he joined wires, muttered arcane phrases to the components, and howled when circuits combusted. Despite his earlier complaints, Grunt proved unexpectedly adept at holding wires and retrieving implements, his large paws proving surprisingly agile when needed. Lila, meanwhile, stood sentinel, her ears attuned to any telltale sound of approaching krill sentinels. The air shimmered with static. A sharp, metallic tang invaded the enclosure. The pile of krill cast-offs mutated into a bizarre chimera of wires, displays, and scavenged parts. Nearly there, Fizz grumbled, his fingers dancing across a makeshift keyboard fashioned from a ruined data slate. Code scrolled across the screen in vibrant green glyphs. Just need to circumvent the firewall, Anne. He paused, his fingers poised above the enter key. Let's do this. He slammed the key. Lights pulsed erratically. A piercing whine echoed through the cell, then abruptly ceased. Did it work? Lila whispered, barely audible. Fizz collapsed back, his face ashen. I believe so. I've released the message. It's out there now. Grunt gingerly approached the jury-rigged device. Specifically, what information did you transmit? A warning, Fizz breathed, his voice still trembling. A warning concerning the nebula, the deception. I exploited their internal channels, disguised as a red alert advisory. Fingers crossed it reaches the Federation before they blunder into the trap. A tidal wave of relief swept over Lila. They'd managed it. They dispatched the message. But the reprieve was fleeting. A klaxon ripped through the air. Red light strobed. The floor trembled beneath their feet. That doesn't sound good, Grunt observed, his voice strained. I suspect they've noticed. The portal to their enclosure hissed open. 2 Krill guards, clad in menacing bio-armor, stood silhouetted, their energy rifles trained on them. The charade ends here, one of the guards rasped, his voice a mechanical distortion. You will accompany us. Lila exchanged a look with Fizz and Grunt. Their escape strategy, whatever form it would take, just became exponentially more complex. As they were hauled from the cell, Lila spotted an anomaly. A subtle, almost invisible flicker on the surface of a discarded Krill display. A glitch, a minor hiccup within the system. Yet it existed. Fizz's message, it appeared, had accomplished more than simply sending a warning. It had unleashed a virus. A hairline fracture in the Krill's seemingly impregnable defense. A scintilla of hope amidst the despair. The daring plan. Lila paced the cramped confines of their makeshift cell, the low hum of the Devourer a constant, irritating drone. The Krill had tightened security after Fizz's little stunt, replacing the lax guards with heavily armed sentinels who seemed to enjoy leering at them through the energy bars. Hope felt like a flickering candle in a hurricane. We can't just sit here and wait to be served up as appetizers, she muttered, more to herself than the others. Fizz, curled up in a corner, was fiddling with a discarded power cell, his face pale in the dim light. Grunt, predictably, was grumbling. Easy for you to say, Captain. You're not the one who nearly short-circuited his brain trying to send a message that probably got intercepted anyway. Lila ignored him, her mind racing. They needed a distraction, something big enough to pull the Krill away from their posts. Something unpredictable. Her gaze fell on the Zorp, still docked in the bay, its battered hull a testament to its many misadventures. A slow smile spread across her face. The Zorp, she announced, her voice gaining a newfound energy. Fizz looked up, his eyes widening. The Zorp? You're suggesting we use that death trap? It's not a death trap, Fizz. It's a challenge. And a darn good one. Think about it. What's the one thing everyone, even the Krill, know about the Zorp? Grunt snorted. That it's held together by duct tape and wishful thinking. Precisely. Its engines are notoriously unreliable. What if we made them really unreliable? Enough to cause a major systems malfunction. Fizz's brow furrowed. A malfunction? You mean, blow them up? Not blow them up entirely, Lila clarified, just enough to create a diversion. Something dramatic. Enough to make the Krill think we're trying to escape in it, but without actually escaping in it. Grunt remained unconvinced. And while they're dealing with our dramatics engine malfunction, what exactly are we supposed to be doing? Twiddling our thumbs in here. While they're distracted, Lila continued, ignoring Grunt's sarcasm, we make our way to the Devourer's control room. Fizz's eyes darted around nervously. The control room? Lila, that's suicide. It'll be crawling with Krill after what I did with their network. Which is why we need the distraction, Lila countered, her voice firm. The control room is our only chance to disable the Devourer's weapons, or better yet, turn them against the Krill. Grunt shifted uncomfortably. Turn their own weapons against them? Now you're just talking crazy, Captain. Maybe, Lila conceded, but it's a crazy that just might work. We know the Krill are planning to ambush the Federation fleet in the nebula. If we can disable the Devourer, we can at least delay them, by the Federation some time. Fizz, despite his fear, was starting to look intrigued. Okay, I'm listening. But how do we get to the control room? It's not like they're going to leave the door unlocked for us. We use the ventilation shafts, Lila explained, pointing to a small, grated opening near the ceiling. I noticed them earlier. They're just big enough for us to squeeze through. It'll be tight and probably filled with krill space dust, but it's our best shot at moving around undetected. Grunt groaned. Ventilation shafts. That sounds delightful. Just what my aching back needs. And what about the krill? They're not exactly known for their forgiving nature if they catch us crawling around in their vents. We'll have to be quiet, Lila admitted, and quick. Fizz, you're the smallest, you'll lead the way. Grunt, you're Grunt. You bring up the rear and make sure no one gets left behind. Grunt huffed. Always the rear. Nobody appreciates my strategic positioning. Your strategic grumbling, maybe, Lila retorted, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. Now, Fizz, how much do you know about Zorp engines? Fizz chewed on his lip. Enough to know they're a disaster waiting to happen. But deliberately causing a controlled malfunction? That's a whole different ball game. I'd need some tools, some time. We'll get you both, Lila said with quiet confidence. First, we need to get out of this cell. I noticed the energy bars flicker intermittently. Fizz, can you do something with that? Fizz perked up, his eyes gleaming with renewed purpose. Flickering energy bars? Oh, I can definitely do something with that. It's practically begging for a little modification. He set to work, carefully manipulating the power cell, his fingers moving with surprising dexterity. Grunt watched him with a mixture of apprehension and grudging admiration. Lila, meanwhile, began to assess the cell, searching for anything that could be used as a weapon, however crude. A loose metal panel in the wall caught her eye. It was thin and flimsy, but with enough force, it could be sharpened into a makeshift blade. After what felt like an eternity, Fizz straightened up, wiping his brow. Okay, I think I've got it. The next time the bars flicker, they're going down. But only for a few seconds. We have to be quick. Lila nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it. The plan, as reckless and improbable as it was about to be put into motion. She glanced at Grunt, who was looking paler than usual. Ready, Grunt. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. As I'll ever be, I suppose. But mark my words, Captain, if we get turned into krill chow, I'm haunting you for the rest of your days. Lila grinned, a genuine, albeit slightly manic, grin. Deal. But let's try to avoid becoming krill chow, shall we? They waited, the silence punctuated only by the hum of the devourer and the frantic beating of their hearts. Then, the energy bars flickered. Fizz took a deep breath, muttered a silent prayer to whatever gods of technology might be listening, and unleashed his modification. The cell plunged into darkness. Vents and explosions. The stale, metallic tang of the ventilation shaft clung to Lila's tongue. It was a tight squeeze, the grimy metal biting into her jumpsuit. Behind her, Grunt grumbled, his bulk scraping against the narrow passage. I still say this is madness. Vents? We'll be space dust bunnies before we reach the control room. Unless you have a better idea, Grunt, Lila muttered, crawling forward. And I distinctly recall you being the one boasting about your intimate knowledge of Zorpian ductwork. Intimate knowledge is knowing where not to stick your head, he retorted, his voice echoing in the confined space. This thing feels like it hasn't been cleaned since Zorpian started building things. Ahead, a faint flicker of light pulsed. Almost there, Lila said, trying to ignore the chorus of coughs and complaints behind her. Fizz, report. A crackle of static followed by Fizz's high-pitched voice filled her ear. Engines prepped, Captain. Just rerouted the flux capacitor thingy. Ready for controlled detonations. Emphasis on controlled. Though, with Zorpian engineering, control is a relative term. Lila gripped a rusty vent strut for balance. Understood, Fizz. Start with small bursts. We want chaos, not obliteration. Obliteration is bad, Fizz confirmed nervously. Got it. Small bursts. Beginning sequence. The vent system vibrated, a low hum resonating through the metal. Lila could almost taste the nervous energy radiating from Fizz. Even through the comm she pressed onward, grunts continued grumbling, a constant soundtrack to their improbable escape. Left at the next junction, Grunt directed, his voice surprisingly clear despite the claustrophobic conditions. See that grime pattern? Only happens when they vent excess ZZ-glorg fumes after a particularly potent fuel mixture. Lila squinted. He was right. A dark, oily stain marked the junction ahead. Lead the way, Grunt. They crawled onward, the vent system a labyrinth of twists and turns. Lila felt sweat prickling her skin under her jumpsuit. The air was thick with the stench of ozone and something vaguely resembling burnt rubber. Then, a sharp, contained bang echoed through the vents. The entire structure shuddered violently. Fizz! Lila shouted into her comm report. Oops. Fizz squeaked. Maybe a tad more than a small burst? But hey! The engines are definitely unhappy. From somewhere deeper within the ship, a klaxon wailed, its discordant shriek cutting through the hum of the engines. Footsteps, heavy and frantic, pounded on the metal floor above. They've noticed, Grunt said, unnecessarily. And by the sound of things, they're not happy either. Keep moving, Lila ordered, adrenaline surging through her veins. Fizz, next burst. But try to keep it smallerish. Another explosion, smaller this time, but still significant, rocked the ship. This time, the klaxon was joined by a series of panicked squawks from Krill voices. Ventilation shaft 42. They're in ventilation shaft 42, one shrieked. Seal the sector. Seal it now, another screeched. Grunt cursed. They're onto us. We need to move faster. He took the lead, his surprisingly agile frame navigating the narrow passages with surprising speed. Lila followed close behind, the sounds of pursuit growing louder. She could hear the scraping of krill claws on metal, the frustrated snarls of the alien guards. Left again! Grunt yelled, sliding around a sharp bend. Then straight for about, krill crap, 50 meters. And then it gets tricky. Tricky how? Lila asked, her heart pounding in her chest. Tricky as in, the shaft narrows. A lot. And there's a grate. A very sturdy grate. Lila groaned. A grate. Of course, there was a grate. Fizz, she said into her comm, her voice tight. We're approaching a grate. Can you grate it for us. Grate. Fizz repeated, his voice trembling. As in, blow it up. As in, persuade it to no longer be a grate, Lila clarified, trying to keep the desperation out of her voice. Right, Fizz said, a new note of determination creeping into his voice. Persuasion it is. Stand back. They crawled forward, the sounds of pursuit closing in. Lila could almost feel the hot breath of the krill on her neck. Brace yourselves! Grunt shouted, shielding his face with his arms. A deafening roar ripped through the ship, followed by a shower of sparks and a wave of heat that scorched Lila's skin. The entire ventilation system bucked and twisted. Then, silence. Lila cautiously lowered her arms. Ahead, the grate was gone. In its place was a gaping hole, leading to something. Fizz, she said into her comm, her voice hoarse. Fizz, report. After a moment of static, Fizz's voice crackled through. Great, grated. How's that for persuasion? Impressive, Lila admitted, crawling towards the hole. Very impressive. She peered through the opening. Below, she could see a dimly lit corridor, patrolled by several krill guards. It wasn't exactly a welcoming sight, but it was better than being trapped in a ventilation shaft with a horde of angry aliens. Ready for the next phase, Grunt? She asked, turning to her reluctant companion. Grunt sighed, his shoulders slumping. As ready as I'll ever be. Just try not to blow up the whole ship, all right? Lila grinned. No promises. Uniforms and chaos. The corridor assaulted their senses with a cloying miasma of ozone and fermented krill musk. Fizz recoiled, muttering about industrial-strength sterilizers. I feel like I've swallowed a mold colony, Grunt added, grimacing. His gaze snagged on the two krill sentries slumped against the wall, their carapaces gleaming faintly under the pulsing emergency lights. Speaking of which, these shells are our priority. Lila, already wrenching at the thick armor of one of the aliens, nodded in grim agreement. It was unpleasant work, extricating the still pliant chitin from the unconscious bodies, yet vital. These reeking exoskeletons represented passage to their objective, the control room. Fizz, can you jam the signals on these things? Lila asked, indicating the embedded comm devices. Silence them before we're knee-deep in trouble. Fizz, his usual hyperactive demeanor dampened, wrestled with a salvaged scanner. Almost there. Krill tech is surprisingly archaic. They lean heavily on pheromonal broadcasts. These just amplify the base signals. Done. They're broadcasting silence. Squeezing into the krill armor proved an ordeal. Lila found the carapace confining, its rigid joints hindering her movements. Grunt's grumbling provided a constant soundtrack. These weren't tailored for Zorpians, I'm telling you. I resemble an overstuffed grub about to split. Conversely, Fizz, despite his inherent nervousness, seemed almost emboldened by the transformation. Perhaps the alien plating instilled a strange feeling of invulnerability. Right then, Captain, let's sow a little carefully calibrated discord. They advanced down the corridor, their footfalls echoing strangely within the alien shells. Lila took the lead, striving to imitate the krill's stilted, deliberate stride. She concentrated on cultivating a bland expression, hoping to melt into the background amongst any patrolling guards. The corridor bled into a broader intersection. To the left, a heavily fortified portal, undoubtedly leading to the brig. To the right, a labyrinth of branching passages. Directly ahead, reinforced blast doors stood sentinel, guarded by a small, but formidable, security station. Above the checkpoint, a harsh krill inscription blazed, Control Nexus Access. Lila indicated their target. That's the prize. Fizz, Grunt, stay tight. And try not to exude too much UN krillness. Approaching the checkpoint, they moved with deliberate caution. Two krill guards stood motionless before the blast doors, their multifaceted eyes sweeping the corridor. Lila felt a cold trickle of sweat snake down her spine. This was the moment. As they neared, one of the guards inclined its head, its antennae twitching like antennae. Lila held her breath, attempting to project an air of command. Reporting for duty, she announced, her voice muffled by the helmet, praying the distortion disguised her true species. The guard emitted a series of clicks and whistles, seemingly a routine acknowledgement. Lila responded with a string of guttural pronouncements Fizz had downloaded from the incapacitated guard's comms. For a heartbeat, it seemed to work. The guard recoiled slightly, apparently satisfied. But then, its antennae flickered anew, and its attention laser-locked onto Grunt. Your gait is anomalous, the guard droned, its voice a low, grinding rasp. Identification. Grunt froze, panic blooming in his eyes behind the krill mask. Lila knew exposure was imminent. He sustained a minor, appendage trauma during the last engagement, Lila countered, improvising swiftly. He is cleared for light duties only. The guard remained unconvinced, advancing a step, its mandibles clicking like castanets. Your pheromonal signature is incongruent. You are not krill. The other guard raised its weapon, a bioenergy rifle humming with murderous intent. Fizz, without hesitation, launched himself forward. He flung a jury-rigged device at the guard's feet. It emitted a piercing shriek that vibrated through the corridor, causing the krill to flinch in agony. Now, Captain! Fizz yelled, his voice cracking with urgency. Lila needed no further encouragement. She drew her energy pistol and discharged, the bolt impacting one of the guards squarely in the carapace. The guard stumbled backward, its armor smoking and scorched. Grunt, shedding all pretense of discomfort, bellowed and charged, colliding with the other guard with surprising momentum. The control room access point exploded into a whirlwind of chaos. Energy bolts ricocheted off the walls, the air thickening with the putrid tang of burnt chitin and ozone. The element of surprise had evaporated. They were compromised. Their infiltration had spiraled into a full-scale firefight. "Fizz, open those blast doors!" Lila yelled, diving behind a console for meager cover. "Grunt, keep them occupied!" Fizz, his fingers dancing across a control panel, muttered curses under his breath. "Krill's security protocols are a bureaucratic nightmare." "Just a minute." Grunt, wielding a pilfered energy rifle, peppered the Krill guards with wild shots, his aim lacking precision, but his enthusiasm boundless. "Come get some, you overgrown space lobsters." Lila knew their position was untenable. Reinforcements would be converging soon. They needed to breach the control room, now. Abruptly, the blast doors groaned and began to retract, revealing a dimly illuminated chamber choked with consoles and monitors. "Go, go, go!" Fizz screamed, scrambling through the opening. Lila trailed closely, discharging a final shot at the remaining guard before vaulting into the control room. Grunt, bringing up the rear, lurched through the doorway, narrowly evading a blast from the guard's rifle. The blast doors slammed shut behind them, sealing them within. But safety remained elusive. The room teemed with Krill technicians, their multifaceted eyes reflecting alarm. The true battle had only just begun. Space wrenches and laser pointers. The Krill technicians, startled by the intrusion, reacted with a disorganized flurry of activity. Some scrambled for cover behind consoles, while others fumbled for their disruptor pistols. Lila roared, swinging the salvaged Krill wrench she'd appropriated from a maintenance locker. It connected with a satisfying thunk against the carapace of one technician, sending him sprawling. "Fizz, shields!" Lila barked, dodging a wild shot that sizzled past her helmet. Fizz, who had been cowering behind a console, peeked out, his large eyes wide with panic. "Shields? But there's so much wiring. And I don't speak Krill tech." He wrung his hands, looking as though he'd rather be back in the cargo hold, polishing plasma conduits. "Just disable them, Fizz." "Find the power regulator?" Lila shouted over the din of blaster fire and Krill screeching. She parried another blow with her wrench, sending sparks flying. Grunt, meanwhile, was proving surprisingly effective. He lumbered forward, using his bulk to knock technicians off their feet. He roared with each strike, a primal sound that seemed to unnerve the Krill more than any blaster shot. "They're getting up. Can't someone invent a wrench that also shoots things?" Grunt grumbled, smashing one Krill against a control panel. Alarms blared, adding to the cacophony. Fizz, spurred by Lila's urgency and Grunt's unexpected ferocity, dove back into the tangle of wires behind the console. He pulled out a multi-tool, its various attachments glinting in the dim light. Okay, power regulator. Let's see, according to my calculations, probably this one." He snipped a thick, purple cable with a flourish. Nothing happened. "Fizz!" Lila yelled, barely deflecting a laser blast that scorched her armor. "Wait! I meant this one." Fizz yelped, snipping a green cable. The lights flickered momentarily, but the shields remained stubbornly active. "Are you just guessing?" Grunt bellowed, wrestling with two Krill technicians at once. "It's highly probabilistic deduction." Fizz retorted, his fingers flying over the control panel. He muttered to himself, consulting schematics that seemed to materialize from thin air within his augmented reality display. "All right, phase modulator, bypass relay, and, aha!" He located a large, pulsating crystal embedded in the console. "This has got to be it." He aimed a small, handheld laser pointer at the crystal. It was a cheap, novelty item he'd picked up at a spaceport gift shop, its intended purpose being to entertain his pet Grobner back on the ship. He clicked the button. The laser pointer, predictably, malfunctioned. Instead of a focus beam, it emitted a chaotic spray of red light, dancing widely across the control room. "What in the galaxy are you doing with a glow stick?" Lila demanded, knocking another krill unconscious with the wrench. "It's not a glow stick. It's a precision energy disruptor. In theory." Fizz stammered, frantically trying to adjust the laser pointer's settings. The chaotic beam bounced off the crystal, then ricocheted off a nearby console, causing sparks to fly. Suddenly, the crystal began to hum. The air crackled with energy. Then, with a final, ear-splitting shriek, the crystal shattered. The energy shields flickered, sputtered, and died. "Yes! I did it!" Fizz cried, pumping his fist in the air. "About time," Grunt grunted, wiping sweat from his brow. He tossed the two unconscious krill aside. "Now, can we get out of here?" Lila didn't answer. She was already moving, weaving through the stunned technicians towards the main control console. It was a massive, obsidian structure, covered in pulsating lights and indecipherable krill glyphs. In the center, a large, multifaceted crystal pulsed with dark energy. This had to be it. The control nexus for the Devourer. She raised her wrench, ready to smash the crystal. But then she paused. Smashing it might disable the ship, but it wouldn't give them any information. They needed to know where the krill were going, what their plans were. She needed to access the ship's navigation data. "Fizz! Can you crack this console?" she yelled, gesturing to the complex interface. Fizz, still flushed with his earlier success, hurried over. He examined the console with a critical eye. This is some seriously advanced krill technology. I'll need time." "We don't have time," Lila snapped, glancing around the control room. More krill were pouring in, their disruptor pistols raised. "Then maybe," Grunt chimed in, "we try the subtle approach." He hefted a large, metal panel he'd ripped off a nearby console. "Anyone speak krill?" He slammed the panel against the main console, denting the obsidian surface with a resounding clang. Sparks flew, and the console shuddered. A series of alarms blared even louder than before. "Grunt!" Lila exclaimed. "What?" "It worked on the engine room door," he mumbled defensively. Suddenly, a section of the console slid open, revealing a smaller, recessed panel. Inside, a single, glowing button pulsed with a soft, blue light. "Well, look at that." "A big, shiny button," Grunt said, a hint of pride in his voice. "Bet that does something." Lila ignored him. She stared at the button, her mind racing. Was it a self-destruct? A distress signal? Or the key to accessing the ship's navigation data? She took a deep breath. They were out of time. They had to act. She reached out and pressed the button. Turning the tide. The hum wasn't a hammer blow, but a creeping intrusion. It tickled Lila's soles, a low vibration amplified by the Devourer's colossal frame. The control room light stuttered, stretching shadows into grotesque parodies. Outside, on the main screen, the nebula seemed to throb in sympathy. "What in the cosmos did you do, Grunt?" Fizz chirped, diving behind a ruined console. Grunt, never one for eloquence, just muttered, pushed a button. Looked important. Lila tuned them out, her attention snagged by the sudden bloom of illuminated symbols circling the central console. They echoed the Zorpian glyphs she knew, yet held an alien sophistication, hinting at the krill's disturbing cunning. "These," she stated, voice tight, "are weapon controls. Not the little plasma spitters. These command the main batteries." Fizz peeked over the console's edge, antennae quivering. "The Devourer's planet crackers? Those things that can dust a moon?" "Precisely," Lila affirmed, her fingers already finding purchase on the glyphs. "And judging by this interface, they are presently targeting the nebula itself. Standard defensive posture, I'd wager." Grunt shuffled forward, brow creased in thought. "So? Pointless to blast the nebula. Unless you're aiming for spectacular self-destruction." Not the nebula, Lila corrected, a spark igniting in her eyes. We're going to paint the Krill fleet across it. Fizz's jaw went slack. That's suicide. They expect us cowering. Fighters will be all over us. They expect Krill compliance, Lila countered, her fingers blurring as she translated glyphs into actions. They anticipate their own protocols. We're about to redefine their expectations. And Fizz, your panic is noted, but I need you on the targeting matrix. Can you tweak it to ID Krill ships? Fizz hesitated, then, fueled by Lila's urgency, dug for another console, his fingers a blur of motion. I think so. Krill systems are surprisingly segmented. Rudimentary, in places. Just do it, Lila snapped, her focus unwavering. The glyphs danced under her touch, peeling back layers of control. She felt the Devourer's caged fury thrumming beneath her, a titan waiting to be unleashed. Lila, Grunt interrupted, surprisingly subdued. You positive about this? Those are the big guns. A slip-up, and we could, well, vaporize ourselves, Lila finished, her lips tugging into a wry smile. Yes, Grunt, I'm aware. But our choices are limited to becoming Krill jerky or striking back. And I'm not keen on jerkadom. She paused, her hand hovering over a final glyph. The tipping point. A single misstep, and the Devourer imploded. But she had to trust her gut, the Zorpian logs, the strange kinship she felt with this vessel. Taking a steadying breath, she depressed the glyph. The hum intensified, blossoming into a guttural roar that rocked the control room. Alarms blared, bathing them in crimson. The main screen flickered, then snapped into tactical mode, revealing the Krill fleet nestled in the nebula's embrace. They were clustered, poised to descend on the Devourer. Got it! Fizz whooped, his voice trembling with elation. Targeting matrix recalibrated. Identifying Krill vessels. Lock established on primary target. Lila didn't waver. Her fingers flew, locking onto the primary target, the Krill command ship, a behemoth that made even the Devourer look diminutive. Firing main cannons, she announced, authority resonating in her tone. The Devourer convulsed. A jolt of raw energy ripped through the ship, throwing Grunt sprawling and sending Fizz tumbling across the console. Then, silence. A deafening, pregnant silence. Did it work? Fizz stammered, scrambling upright. Lila held her breath, eyes riveted to the main screen. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then, an incandescent flare erupted from the Devourer's bow. A beam of pure energy, thicker than any weapon she'd witnessed, speared into the nebula, vaporizing gas and dust in its wake. The beam slammed into the Krill command ship. The vessel shimmered, its shields flaring momentarily before dissolving. The beam punched through its hull, obliterating the vessel in a supernova of light and debris. A collective gasp swept through the control room. Even Grunt, the resident naysayer, gaped in speechless awe. Direct hit, Lila breathed, a touch of disbelief in her voice. Primary target, neutralized. Bedlam erupted in the nebula. Krill fighters scattered like insects, their formations collapsing as they grappled with the unthinkable. Panic flooded the comm channels, a screeching cacophony of static and desperate cries. They're losing it. Fizz crowed, his dread supplanted by exhilaration. They have no clue. They know something catastrophic occurred, Lila countered, her mind already strategizing. They know the Devourer turned rogue. We have a window, a sliver of one. We exploit it to escape. But, where to? Fizz asked, his voice laced with apprehension. The nebula is a death trap. And the Krill will hunt us. Lila indicated the tactical display. A stable wormhole sits on the nebula's fringe. Unguarded, deemed too treacherous for Krill navigation. That's our exit. A wormhole. Grunt groaned, clutching his head. Fantastic. Just what we needed. More cosmic weirdness. Brace yourself, Grunt, Lila said, resolve hardening her gaze. Things are about to escalate spectacularly. She began inputting coordinates for the wormhole, her fingers a blur over the console. The Devourer shuddered, pivoting toward the nebula's edge. Krill fighters, still reeling from the annihilation of their flagship, struggled to intercept. As the Devourer plunged into the swirling vortex of the wormhole, Lila cast a final glance at the tactical display. The Krill fleet was in chaos, their communication scrambled, their ranks decimated. For the first time since that fateful distress call, a spark of hope flickered within her. They had a chance. A fragile one, but a chance nonetheless. They had shifted the odds, however briefly. And that moment, she sensed, might just be enough. Federation to the rescue. The Devourer rattled like bones in a cosmic dice cup, a drawn-out metallic shriek tearing through the vessel as it nosedived into the wormhole's chromatic chaos. Alarms shrilled, a discordant chorus of impending annihilation, only partially drowned out by the Krill crew's unsettling hush. Lila's grip on the command console tightened, knuckles gleaming bone-white. Eyes laser-focused on the swirling abyss ahead, she snapped, "Status report." Her voice, though strained, held a core of steel. At his station, Fizz Sparkplug was a hyperkinetic whirlwind, fingers blurring across the control panel. "Shields critical. Nav offline. I'm fighting to recalibrate, but the wormhole's EM field is pure pandemonium." A nervous edge underscored Fizz's enthusiasm. He relished a challenge, but this verged on suicide. "We're flying by vibes here, Captain." "Then aim us in a generally forward direction," Lila countered, her gaze flinty. Blind was preferable to oblivion. She banked on Fizz's uncanny knack for resurrecting defunct tech. "The Krill?" Utterly bamboozled, "Captain," Zara's voice crackled through the comms, relaying data from external sensors. "Their formations are dissolving. Some are attempting to follow, others, it appears they're engaging in friendly fire." Lila permitted herself a bleak smile. The chaos unleashed by the Devourer's retasked cannons continued to reverberate through their ranks. "Excellent. Let them self-destruct." Every moment of confusion bought them precious escape time. Another, more violent shudder racked the ship. Grunt Grumblestone's voice, steeped in his trademark grumpy fatalism, echoed from the bridge's rear. "You positive this bucket's gonna hold, Captain? I can practically hear the rivets screaming. Last thing I need is to be pured in some celestial garbage disposal." "Then help us keep it intact, Grunt," Lila retorted, her attention glued to the wormhole. "Brace yourselves. It's about to get interesting." As if on cue, the Devourer bucked like a bronco, tossed violently from side to side. The wormhole's swirling colors deepened, resolving into bizarre, almost dreamlike geometries. Gravity became a liquid, viscous substance, making it a struggle to remain upright. Fizz unleashed a string of curses as sparks erupted from his console. Abruptly, the ship shot forward with explosive force, as though fired from a railgun. The swirling colors dissolved, replaced by the comforting, star-dusted tapestry of space. The alarms, thankfully, began to wind down. "We're through," Fizz crowed, his voice raw with elation. "We actually pulled it off." Lila slumped in her seat, exhaling a breath she'd been unconsciously holding. They had survived. They were free. But complacency was a luxury they couldn't afford. Damage assessment. And scan for anything and everything. Grunt, surprisingly swift, was the first to respond. Hulls holding, mostly. Minor breaches in sectors 4 and 7. Nothing I can't slap some synth steel on. But the engines, they're begging for mercy. We're damned lucky they didn't detonate in that cosmic washing machine. Zara's voice, now laced with palpable awe, cut him short. "Captain, you need to see this." Lila activated the main view screen. The sight that greeted her sent a jolt of hope through her weary body. A squadron of streamlined, chrome vessels, bearing the unmistakable crest of the Galactic Federation, approached at speed. Their weapons were hot, but their bearing was clearly defensive. Behind them, a Federation battlecruiser, its shield shimmering like an aurora borealis, stood like a sentinel of salvation. "This is Captain Eva Rostova of the Galactic Federation cruiser Indomitable," a clear, commanding voice resonated over the comms. "Identify yourselves." Lila straightened, adrenaline surging. "This is Captain Lila of the salvage vessel Devourer. We responded to a distress call and things escalated." A brief silence followed. "We've been monitoring the situation in the nebula, Captain. Your actions haven't gone unnoticed. You are ordered to stand down and prepare to be boarded." "Understood, Captain Rostova," Lila acknowledged, cutting the connection. Turning to her crew, a slow grin spread across her face. "Looks like backup has arrived." But the reprieve was short-lived. Zara's voice, tight with urgency, crackled over the comms once more. "Captain! The Krill, they're rallying. They're forming a blockade around the wormhole." Lila's elation vanished as quickly as it had come. The Krill possessed tenacity if nothing else. They wouldn't relinquish their prey so easily. She spun back to the view screen. Federation vessels held position, weapons trained on the vanguard of Krill ships. A tense standoff was unfolding. "Captain Rostova, the Krill are attempting to box us in," Lila reported. "We could use a hand." "We are fully aware of the developing situation, Captain." Rostova's voice remained calm, almost glacial. "We will engage the Krill. Your priority is to rendezvous with the Indomitable." Without a moment's hesitation, the Federation ships surged forward, unleashing torrents of energy. Beams of incandescent light lanced through the void, obliterating the Krill formations. The Krill ships, still disorganized and reeling from the loss of their command structure, were caught completely off guard. The skirmish was brief and decisive. The Federation's superior technology and combat experience proved overwhelming. Krill fighters detonated in spectacular fireballs, their wreckage cartwheeling into the abyss. The larger Krill cruisers, hobbled by compromised systems and demoralized crews, were unable to mount a cohesive resistance. Sensing imminent annihilation, the surviving Krill vessels shattered formation and scattered, fleeing back into the swirling nebula and its inky recesses. The wormhole, once a portal to peril, became a refuge for cowards. "The Krill are in full retreat," Captain Rostova announced. "You are clear to proceed to the Indomitable." Lila released a shuddering sigh of relief. They had succeeded. Against impossible odds, they had turned the tables on the Krill and lived to recount the tale. Turning to her crew, her eyes sparkled with genuine pride. "Well executed, everyone," she declared, her voice thick with admiration. "You were magnificent. Now, let's get this rust bucket over to the Indomitable and see if they offer anything resembling caffeinated refreshment." As the Devourer limped in the direction of the Federation battlecruiser, Lila couldn't suppress a smile. They had stared down death, destruction, and a mountain of bureaucratic red tape, emerging more resilient, more resourceful, and more united than they ever had been. And she, Captain Lila, had guided them through it all. The adventure, it seemed, had only just begun. Heroes of the Federation. The hangar bay shimmered with an almost unbearable light. After the claustrophobic darkness of the wormhole and the battered confines of the Devourer, the pristine, chrome-plated surfaces of the Federation starbase felt alien. Fizz bounced on the balls of her feet, a manic grin plastered across her face. "Did you see that, Lila? Did you see the look on those Krill faces when we popped out of the wormhole? Priceless. Absolutely priceless." Lila, still feeling the tremor of the wormhole in her bones, managed a tired smile. "I saw, Fizz. You did good work back there." Grunt, ever the pragmatist, grunted. "Good work getting shot at, more like. I've seen smoother rides on a grave train full of rocks." He ran a calloused hand over a newly acquired dent in his already battered armor. "Still, we're alive. That's something, I suppose." A Federation officer, resplendent in a uniform that looked starched to within an inch of its life, approached them. "Captain Lila? Welcome to Starbase Aurora. I am Commander Valerus. The Federation Council extends its deepest gratitude for your unconventional assistance in dealing with the Krill threat. Unconventional was an understatement. Lila suppressed a chuckle. Commander, we did what we had to. Valerus's lips tightened slightly. Indeed. Your repurposing of Krill weaponry was bold. The Council is reviewing the legality of such actions. However, the results speak for themselves. You have dealt a significant blow to the Krill command structure. Before Lila could respond, a fanfare erupted. A squad of Federation Marines, their armor gleaming, marched into the hangar, flanking a raised platform that had materialized seemingly from nowhere. The platform held 3 pedestals, each draped in a shimmering blue cloth. "What's all this?" Grunt muttered, adjusting his helmet. Valerus puffed out his chest. "A ceremony, Captain. The Federation wishes to formally acknowledge your bravery and service." He gestured towards the platform. "You, Captain Lila, Fizz Sparkplug, and Grunt Grumblestone, are to be awarded the Medal of Valor." Fizz squealed with delight, clapping her hands. Grunt, on the other hand, looked like he'd rather be scrubbing the Devourer's plasma conduits. Lila just felt numb. It had all happened so fast. One minute they were hauling scrap, the next they were heroes. The next few hours were a blur of speeches, flashing cameras, and awkward handshakes. Lila stood stiffly as Valerus pinned the Medal of Valor, a heavy disc of polished palladium, to her flight suit. The weight of it felt significant, a tangible reminder of the lives she had saved and the risks she had taken. Fizz, practically vibrating with excitement, received hers with a whoop and a spontaneous hug for the startled Valerus. Grunt merely grunted, accepting his medal with a stoic nod. After the ceremony, they were ushered into a lavishly appointed lounge. Soft synth music filled the air, and trays laden with exotic delicacies circulated through the crowd of Federation officers and dignitaries. Lila felt out of place, more comfortable with the grease and grime of the Devourer than the sterile perfection of the starbase. "Fancy shindig, eh, Captain?" Grunt said, his voice muffled by a mouthful of some kind of iridescent fruit. "It's something," Lila agreed, taking a sip of a drink that tasted vaguely of strawberries and electricity. Fizz, meanwhile, had already found her way to a group of Federation engineers, peppering them with questions about plasma conduits and warp drive optimization. Lila watched her, a small smile playing on her lips. Fizz was in her element. Valerus approached them, a grim expression on his face. "Captain, there is more. While the Council appreciates your actions, they are also concerned about the ramifications." Lila sighed. She knew it was too good to be true. Ramifications? The Krill are unpredictable. Your attack on their command ship has provoked them. They will retaliate. The Federation is bracing for a full-scale assault. So, we've just made things worse. Grunt grumbled. "Not necessarily," Valerus said, his voice softening slightly. "You have also shown us the Krill's weaknesses. Their reliance on centralized command, their vulnerability to internal disruption. We can use this information to our advantage." He paused. "And the Council has authorized a reciprocal gesture. For your efforts." Lila raised an eyebrow. "A reciprocal gesture?" Valerus nodded. "The Devourer is not exactly state-of-the-art. The Council has approved a complete overhaul. New engines, reinforced hull plating, advanced weaponry, anything you need." Fizz, overhearing the conversation, abandoned her discussion with the engineers and raced over. "Seriously? You mean, we get an upgrade?" "A real upgrade." Valerus managed a thin smile. "Indeed, Miss Sparkplug. Consider it a thank you for your ingenuity." The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. While Federation technicians swarmed over the Devourer, tearing out outdated systems and installing cutting-edge technology, Lila, Fizz, and Grunt were given free rein to customize their ship. Fizz, of course, was in heaven, poring over schematics and arguing with the technicians about the optimal placement of plasma conduits. Grunt, surprisingly, also got involved, meticulously examining the new armor plating and insisting on extra reinforcement in certain vulnerable areas. Lila focused on the weaponry, wanting to ensure that the Devourer was capable of defending itself against any future Krill attacks. The biggest upgrade, however, was reserved for the Zorp. The ancient, lumbering hauler was practically rebuilt from the ground up. It received a new warp drive, vastly increasing its speed and range. Its cargo holds were enlarged and reinforced, capable of carrying significantly more weight. And, most importantly, it was equipped with a state-of-the-art cloaking device, rendering it virtually invisible to sensors. Lila stood on the bridge of the newly upgraded Zorp, feeling a sense of pride she hadn't expected. The ship was no longer a rust bucket. It was a sleek, powerful vessel, capable of holding its own against almost anything. She looked over at Fizz, who was practically bouncing in her seat, and Grunt, who was actually smiling, albeit a very small, almost imperceptible smile. "Well," Lila said, her voice filled with a newfound confidence. "What do you say we take her for a spin?" Fizz whooped with delight. Grunt just nodded, his hand already reaching for the controls. The Zorp, now a true hero in its own right, powered up its engines and prepared to embark on its next adventure. The galaxy awaited. A legend is born. Once a spacefaring jalopy patched together with cosmic ingenuity and sheer chutzpah, the Devourer now radiated power beneath the Federation dockyard's glare. Its revitalized hull, a lustrous blend of fortified uranium and Fizz's self-proclaimed, scarcity-adjacent material, thrummed with latent energy. Inside, the tang of fresh sealant mingled with the familiar tang of ozone and reproposed coffee, an eccentric bouquet Lila found surprisingly comforting. "Magnificent, wouldn't you agree, Captain?" Fizz practically vibrated beside her, goggles ablaze with reflected light. He'd virtually taken up residence in the Devourer's engine room these past weeks, coaxing every last iota of performance from the augmented systems. The Federation engineers, initially wary of his frenetic approach, were ultimately won over by his infectious zeal and, more crucially, his knack for improving everything he touched. Lila trailed her fingers along the polished exterior, a subtle smile gracing her features. Magnificent and imposing. Almost evokes a pang of nostalgia for the old girl, with all her eccentricities. Eccentricities. Fizz spluttered, adjusting his spectacles. "Captain, eccentricities suggests a certain charm." The old Devourer was riddled with death traps. "We're talking about a vessel whose gravity compensator only functioned bi-weekly." And yet, Lila rejoined, a twinkle in her eye, "We persevered. More than persevered. We became us aboard that ship." Fizz's manic energy momentarily ebbed, his expression softening. "True," he conceded quietly. "True, we did." The revamped Zorp, newly christened the Silent Serpent, was even more striking. Shrouded in stealth technology and bristling with standard Federation armaments, it resembled a predator poised to strike from the inky depths. Lila imagined the Krill, still nursing their wounds, would be in for a rude awakening should their paths cross once more. "Right, Captain." Fizz clapped his hands, his usual exuberance restored. "Regarding the Zorp, I've been tinkering." He ushered her toward a newly integrated console, its surface alive with blinking indicators and intricate displays. "You recall the Zorp's, shall we say, chronological challenges?" Lila arched a brow. "Chronological challenges?" "Fizz, the Zorp was perpetually tardy. Consistently, reliably tardy. It was practically a running gag." "Precisely," Fizz declared triumphantly. "And I, Fizz Sparkplug, have remedied it. Behold." He tapped a control, and a diminutive holographic projection sprang to life. It depicted a complex formula, adorned with symbols vaguely reminiscent of musical notations and flattened insects. "The chronometric harmonizer. It aligns the Zorp's temporal signature with, well, everything else. No more lagging behind. Guaranteed." Lila gazed at the equation, utterly perplexed. "So, it makes the Zorp punctual?" "In essence, yes." Fizz beamed. I even incorporated a feature that automatically dispenses a cup of joe for the pilot upon arrival. Just a little perk." Lila chuckled. Only Fizz could concoct a contraption that simultaneously bent the fabric of space-time and brewed a palatable beverage. "I'll believe it when I witness it, Fizz. But I appreciate the initiative." The acid test arrived the following day, during a simulated skirmish. Lila, commanding the Devourer, monitored the Silent Serpent, with Grunt at the controls, as it detached from the mothership. The premise was simple: Grunt would utilize the Zorp's cloaking field to penetrate a simulated Krill fortification, procure intelligence, and then return. Lila held her breath as the Zorp dematerialized from the sensors. Time dilated, each heartbeat an eternity. The exercise was meticulously designed to push the novel systems to their limits, challenging both crew and vessel to their breaking point. Finally, after what felt like eons, a signal flickered on the Devourer's radar. The Silent Serpent had returned. And, according to the chronometric harmonizer, it was perfectly on schedule. "Grunt, report," Lila instructed, her voice laced with anticipation. A gravelly voice echoed over the comms. "Intel obtained, Captain. Target neutralized. Coffee, surprisingly passable." Lila exchanged a glance with Fizz, who was practically levitating with excitement. "Outstanding work, Grunt. Return to base." As the Silent Serpent redocked with the Devourer, Lila observed something peculiar. Grunt, still secured in his flight chair, was smiling. A genuine, unprompted, almost imperceptible smile. It was a fleeting expression, gone in an instant, but Lila caught it. She'd never before witnessed Grunt smile. Not even after they'd obliterated the Krill command vessel. Later that evening, as the Devourer prepared to depart the Federation dockyards, Lila stood on the bridge, gazing out at the star-dusted tapestry of the cosmos. The vessel felt transformed, augmented, more vibrant. Yet it wasn't merely the novel hardware or the pristine paintwork. It was something deeper. It was the realization that they had confronted insurmountable odds and emerged triumphant. It was the camaraderie forged in the crucible of battle, a bond that transcended hierarchy and temperament. She considered the dilapidated Devourer, the one with the temperamental gravity system and the porous life support. She understood that it wasn't merely a ship, it was an emblem. An emblem of tenacity, of resourcefulness, of the unwavering spirit of a crew that refused to surrender, even when facing annihilation. And now, that emblem had been resurrected. The Devourer and the Silent Serpent were no longer mere freighters. They were something greater. They were legends in the making. Lila inhaled deeply, the tang of ozone invigorating her senses. She knew that the galaxy was a vast and treacherous expanse, fraught with countless dangers and unforeseen threats. But she also knew that she had a crew she could depend upon, a vessel that could withstand anything, and a spirit that would never be extinguished. "All right, people," she announced, her voice resonating with newfound resolve. "Let's go see what kind of mayhem we can stir up."